All right, we are officially live. Hi, everyone. All right, we'll begin with our blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai
Ata Adonai
melech haolam
Eloheinu melech
asher
haolam
kiddushanu
Ishanu
b'mitzvah
v'totam
v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
V'rei Torah.
All right, let me share my screen. Here we go. All right. Does that look okay for everybody?
Yes.
Very small.
It's too, let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Here we go. Whoa. Let's see. I do that.
That's better.
Is that better?
Yeah, at least for me.
How's that for everyone else? Good?
Good.
Good. Okay. All right. So we're going to begin with the beginning of our parasha, Vayigash. So we're going to read, it's a bunch of verses. You'll kind of notice that both in the Hebrew and the English, there are bolded words. We're going to kind of count those words in a little bit and see what might be going on with our characters, their emotions. We're going to kind of dive into the psychology of Joseph and his brothers this week. All right. Anyone want to read for us? Steve.
Then Judah came near unto him and said, O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh.
Okay. Keep going.
My Lord asked his servants, saying, Have ye a father or a brother?
Now, let's just pause there for a second. Okay, so Judah comes near Joseph, doesn't know it's Joseph yet. Okay. The first thing that Joseph asks is, do you have a father or a brother? Now, who do you think the brother is that he's asking about?
Benjamin.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
And we said unto my Lord, We have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one.
Mhm.
And his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him.
So what's interesting here is they all respond, right? And we said unto my Lord, Vanomer el Adoni. So they all respond, even though Judah is the one who approached him originally. And they say, we have an old father, right? And then he mentions that they have a little brother, Benjamin, and then another brother who's dead. So Joseph, right? And then he alone is left. Benjamin is left, and his father loves him. Okay, so now we've had the word father three times. Okay, keep going.
And thou saidst unto thy servants, Bring him down unto me, that I may set mine eyes upon him.
Okay,
And and we said unto my Lord, The lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die.
so here now, Joseph knows about that Benjamin is still alive and doing well, and his father's alive, perhaps. And he's asking, I want to see my brother, right? It's really his only true biological brother, right? Um, and then they respond, he can't leave because if Benjamin were to leave, it would kill Jacob.
Hmm.
Okay, keep
And
going.
thou saidst unto thy servants, Except your youngest brother come down with you, you shall see my face no more.
Okay. So now this is, they're like kind of retelling the story at the end of last week. Joseph, who says, if you don't bring Benjamin with you, then you will never see me again, and you're not going to get any food, and you're probably all going to die due to the famine. Okay? Keep
And it
going.
And it came to pass when we came up unto thy servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord.
Okay, so now
Oh, I get it.
he's retelling the story again. They go back, and this is when Judah and everyone told
Right.
Jacob about what happened. At first, what's interesting, Jacob says, "No, you can't take Benjamin with you, right? It's gonna kill me, all of this." And what's interesting, and I didn't bring this in, but it was from last week, in that moment when Jacob changes his mind and allows Benjamin to go and for all of them to go back, the Torah uses the word Yisrael in that moment. So kind of his God wrestling identity allows him to let go of Benjamin and to send him back down to Egypt with the rest of his brothers. But Jacob, the more timid of the identities, refuses at first. Okay?
And our father said, go again, buy us a little food.
Okay.
And we said, we cannot go down. If your youngest brother be with us, then will we go down? For we may not see the man's face, except our youngest brother be with us. To be honest with you, Rabbi, I'm confused by the English.
I know
Very unclear.
sorry. We'll clear it up in a little bit.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, Robert?
Yeah, this is, I'm certainly not a biblical scholar, but I'm wondering why this story is being told in the first person, whereas all other stories that I've seen seem to be told in the third person. Is there a reason for that?
I think part is we're trying to get into the mind of Judah, who was sharing this, and the mind of all of the brothers. It makes it much more personal. Right? It's not necessarily a narrator sharing the story. George?
Yeah, there's a theory on this that it's actually about Joseph because he's hearing about his father, his servant,
Hmm.
and he lived to 110. He lived shorter. He got subtracted for disrespecting his father.
Hmm.
Something to that effect.
Who disrespected his father?
Because your father, your servant, what Judah saying to Joseph, your father, your servant,
Hmm.
okay, that was the problem,
Yeah.
Well, they're taking him as if he was the Pharaoh,
right? But
Yeah.
which they would all be servants to them.
no, 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 no. But Joseph is accepting this.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, he's my servant, okay,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't say that anywhere.
Well, that's not
That you're just implying
We'll we'll
it.
we'll get through some of the commentators and kind of seeing,
right.
what's going on the inside of these characters.
Okay.
All right, let's keep going.
Uh, I think, and we said we cannot go down. If our youngest brother be with us, then we go down, for we may not see the man's face, except our youngest brother be with us.
Hmm.
And thy servant my father said to us, ye know that my wife bore me two sons.
Okay.
And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I have not seen him since. And if ye take this one also from me, and harm befall him, ye will bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Now, therefore, when I come to thy servant my father, and the lad is not with us, seeing that his soul is bound up with the lad's soul, it will come to pass when he seeth that the lad is not with us, that he will die, and thy servants will bring down the gray hairs of thy servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave.
So this is Judah again, retelling the story of his interaction with his father and to Joseph. Okay. Let's go back and just count all the times it says the word father and the different versions of it. Okay. So we have in verse 19, Joseph says, do you have a father? Right? Hayesh lechem av o ach. Do you all have a father or a brother? Okay. They say, Yesh lanu av zaken. Yes, we have an old father. Okay. And then they're describing Benjamin, right? Uh, Va'aviv ahevo, and his father loved him. Okay. Now we're going back. They're all talking. Okay. All of the brothers. Um, they're describing what Jacob is saying. Right? The lad cannot leave his father. His father would die. What's interesting here is they're not saying our father would die. Right? It's the same father. They had different mothers, right? But why would they change the description of Jacob in this moment? Right, when talking about Benjamin and Jacob, why is it his father instead of ours? Any thought? Stan?
Well, it's obvious that uh, Jacob, Israel, has a different feeling for the mothers of their
Yeah,
children,
yeah,
and seems to, in some sense, have two families that
yeah,
are trying to put together in this way. And he describes some brothers in that way, to some is another, or they describe each other that way.
yeah. What's interesting is here, like it's all of the brothers that are talking about this, right? All of them who were, Leah's children,
Over
right?
there from
They
the
felt
father,
othered,
the same mother.
the same mother. So they are saying it's almost as if, Jacob was a different person to Benjamin and Joseph, almost a different father. Okay. And then we have, right, it came to pass when we came up to the servant, my father. So again, now it's back to personal, my father. And then, right, he said, our father. They're changing again from his to my to our. Okay. Again, verse 27, Avi, my father. Verse 30, same thing, my father. And then the last one, verse 31, Avinu, our father. So it's very interesting the way they're describing their relationship to their father, compared to, it seems like, the relationship between Benjamin and Jacob. Okay. And before we go further, what do you think's going through the mind of Joseph at this time? Before we see his response.
Well, in a way, Joseph is, Joseph is testing them to see if they think of Benjamin differently than they thought of him when they sold him into slavery.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going a little bit more.
Should I read 32?
Yeah, read 32 through 34.
Okay. For thy servant became surety for the lad unto my father, saying, If I bring him not unto thee, then shall I bear the blame to my father forever.
Okay.
Now therefore let thy servant, I pray thee, abide instead of the lad a bondman to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad be not with me, lest I look upon the evil that shall come to my father?
Okay. What's fascinating here is if we look at verse 32, I didn't bold it, but we have the word vichatani, right? Like a chet, a sin. And this is again Judah, like he's gonna be um have to carry the sin, essentially. But what was Judah's original sin?
Suggesting that he sell the brothers,
Mm-hmm. For Joseph. Right here,
selling Joseph.
this whole dialogue between Judah, his brothers, Joseph, leading into how Joseph is going to respond, is essentially Judah doing teshuvah for his sin. And Joseph is really listening, I believe, intently at every time the word Av appears, father. How has Judah changed in his relationship to Jacob? How has Judah's relationship changed between his brothers and between Benjamin? Is Judah and the rest of his brothers are they worthy of being forgiven for their sin of, at first attempting to kill him and then, selling him into slavery and all of that. Okay, so this is how the chapter ends. So now we go to chapter 45. So now we get Joseph's response. Someone else want to take over? Robert?
Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth thy father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were affrighted at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt.
Right. Well, let's really unpack this before we look at some of the other translations and other commentaries. Right, so now Joseph, he can't contain his emotions anymore. Right? He tells all of the other Egyptians, leave my presence and just leave me with these, Hebrews, these Israelites. Right? Then Joseph cries. Right? Last week, I'm going to talk about this on Shabbos, but Joseph kept trying to suppress his tears. Right? He goes last week into a hiding place into his house, Rashi tells us, to cry. Right? He'll turn away and cry, and now finally, he can't control it. Right? He has heard the word of a number of times. We forgot to count how many, but it was, let me do it really quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. He can't control himself. He cries so loud that everyone could hear him. And then Joseph comes up and he says, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. A name that he probably hasn't used in some time once he was given an Egyptian name last week. And then here's the phrase that we're going to focus on a little bit. Ha'od avi chai. Okay. Those of you who might know a little Hebrew, how might you translate those three words?
Right.
George?
Okay, with a hey, it's a question mark.
Yeah.
Does my father still live?
Does my father
Mine,
still
not
live?
ours or yours or
Exactly.
right,
Right? Does my father still live?
right,
Right? And then his brothers, velo yachlu echav la'anot oto. His brothers were unable to answer him
right,
because they were kind of frightened by his
yeah,
face.
right.
Right? They were in shock, essentially. We're going to unpack that a little bit as well. So here, Joseph comes again. And here's what's fascinating, right? Geshu na Eli, right? The same root as Vayigash. When Judah approached Joseph in the beginning of our parsha, now we have Joseph telling them, please, like Geshu na Eli, please come close to me, approach me, right? It's me, Joseph, Achichem, your brother. Right? The first in verse 3, he just says, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph, right? Does my father still live? They're in shock. He then has to describe, I'm Joseph, your brother. He doesn't end there, right? Asher mechartem oti mitzrayma, that you sold me to Egypt. So he's kind of bringing it all back, right? I'm Joseph, your brother, the one that you thought that you lied about that was dead for, all of these years. And just in case you forgot, you're the ones that put me here. You sold me into slavery. Now look at me, right? I am, you know, the second most well-known man in all of Egypt. Okay. So before we go further, why do you think his brothers were frightened?
They
Anita?
had time.
Well, they're the ones that instigated that this whole thing
Yeah.
and told the father that he was, dead by an attack of an animal.
Yeah.
But I was kind of thinking about what you said momentarily, a few minutes,
Mhm.
and and it almost is like when you're authenticating an account
Mm.
and you have to have some information that you're the real Anita.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what is the numeric street address?
Mm. Yeah.
Or of no longer use mother's maiden name, but he's giving facts
Mm.
that only the brothers would have known.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's authenticating that it really is
It
Joseph.
really is Joseph, right? Because he doesn't look like the Joseph they knew, right? He looks like an Egyptian, right? He's dressed in, royal garbs. He probably has makeup on. Let's keep going.
I think they
Right.
have eyeliner. You see the pictures of
All right.
That's-
So we had, George, you translated Ha'od Avichai, right? Is my
Yeah.
father still alive? All right, we're gonna look at other versions of how translators have translated those three words. But what questions might we have? Why is this the first question that Joseph asked after that, conversation or monologue between Judah and him? All right, we had 14 times the word of appeared. It kind of seems like, based on the conversation that he just had, that Jacob is still alive. But what do you think Joseph is doing here? What is these three words, what do they do for him? Thoughts?
Has he already just, he's already told his brothers who he is, correct?
So at this point, he just said, Ani Yosef. I am Joseph.
Then why doesn't he say, is our father still alive?
Okay, good question. Why does he, any guesses? Right, we can look back at the conversation above. Right, when it came to Benjamin, it was his father. But when it came to Judah and his uh, siblings, it was our father or my father. So we talked about how there's almost a difference in how they treated one another and how Jacob treated Benjamin, Joseph, the rest of them. Okay, so we have Avi rather than Avinu, Anita.
Well, they've already said that the father's alive.
But
And,
but did they?
so I'm thinking here, it's it's I can't believe my father really, is he really alive?
Yeah,
I see it as, oh my gosh, he's really still alive.
yeah,
I might be able to see him again.
yeah,
So it's almost like he's been told that if he doesn't take Benjamin back, that the father will die.
yeah,
So he knows the father's alive, but it's the internalization
yeah,
of the fact that he really is still alive.
yeah. And let's go back now, a couple of weeks. How did Joseph and Jacob leave each other? What was the last interaction they had?
Oh, yeah.
I, I
Stan,
think it,
Eileen, go for it.
I thought his father said to him, go where your brothers are.
Yeah, he says, go find your brothers.
I think he was maybe bringing them food or something, but he does tell him to go find your brothers.
Yeah, he says, oh, they're somewhere out in the field. Go find your brothers. Right. And then Joseph finds that mysterious man who says they went that way. right? So he never saw his father again. He never got to share what happened to him. And some commentators say that Jacob knew what needed to happen, right? Joseph's ego was too big, and he knew that this needed to happen in order for Joseph to kind of humble himself. Stan?
Well, Joseph in his position, if he wanted to, all those other years could have found out.
He could have, exactly, right?
Right.
There's great
If he really wanted
commentators
to.
that say, why did Joseph not write home? Right? Joseph could have sent a letter to his father saying, hey, it's me, Joseph. You'll never believe where I am and who I am now. And guess what? You're a grandfather, right? Doesn't share any of that, right? And I mentioned this last week in my sermon that there's an idea like Joseph gets a new name, right? His firstborn is, Manasseh, about how he has almost forgotten his past. He's able to move forward in Egypt and all of this. And it's almost like Joseph saying, hey, listen, my father sent me away, and then my brother sold me into slavery. I started a new life here. I don't need to write home, right? Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to look at a bunch of different translations of those three words. Okay? Ha'od avichai. Okay? So go through. This is Everett Fox. He says, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? So that's exactly like what George, you had said. That's a very literal translation. Right? Fox and, as we'll see, Robert Alter, they are very like literalist when it comes to translating the Bible. Okay, so Alter also says, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? Okay, the Common English Bible, I think this may have been what Anita, you may have mentioned, right? I'm Joseph, exclamation point, which is different. Is my father really still alive? Right? He heard all of these stories about his father, 14 times we had the word of, but he's in shock. Is he really alive? Okay. Now the new JPS. So what we were reading, the translation that Steve, you were reading with the Old English, that's the old JPS from the early 20th century, right? Where it said, I am Joseph, doth my father yet live? Okay. Old JPS. New JPS, very interesting. Is my father still well?
Mm,
What do we think, George? Why are you?
well, I mean, you can interpret it any way you want. Wouldn't you use the word beret or something?
Yeah,
That's
right? Yeah,
my,
yeah. Is he still healthy? Is he still
yeah,
okay? But it's
yeah,
interesting that the new JPS, right? Originally, 100 years ago,
right.
does he still live? Is he still alive? More literal. And now it seems like the new JPS is kind of getting more into the mind of Joseph, right? Is he still well? Right? It makes us assume that Joseph knows his father's alive, but now he's wondering about, is he well? Is he healthy? Is he still mentally aware? All of this. Okay. And then the last one, Spicer says, again, this is similar to the JPS. I'm Joseph. Is father still in good health? Now, what's missing here?
Fine.
I,
My, right? Is father still in good health? Very fascinating,
boy.
right? And what's, amazing, every single translation of the Torah, right, is a commentary.
Yeah.
Okay, Stan?
It shows an agenda, not only a commentary.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through at least the agenda of the first three versus the last two.
Well,
What's yeah,
I think that in the modern world, we're more emotional. In the other world, we were
yeah,
more factual, if you want to call it that.
yeah. The first three are very like literal, like they're taking the Hebrew for what it says, right? The newer translations are trying to be a little bit more emotional, a little bit more,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to look at Alter's commentary. And if you haven't read Robert Alter's, I don't know if I have my copy here, if it's at home. I think it's at home. He just came out with this, I think, during the pandemic, a full translation of the entire Tanakh. It's amazing because it's a literal translation, but he also tries to keep the flow of the Hebrew, like kind of the poetic style of it. But he also has a commentary on it. Okay, so let's look at what he has to say. Anybody? Stan?
I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? His very first utterance after his sobs have subsided is the essential revelation of identity, the two-word in the Hebrew bombshell tossed at his brothers. He follows this by asking whether his father is still alive, in bold, as though he could not altogether trust the assurances they have given him about when he questioned them in the guise of the Egyptian viceroy, who was. His repeated reference to, quote, my father serves double duty. The first person singular possessive expresses his sense of personal connection with old Jacob. He is, after all, my father. He is saying to his brothers, but is also idiomatic, the usage of the familiar father in biblical Hebrew rather than Abba in Aramaic and later Hebrew.
So,
So what is Alter saying? Why does he have to ask this question? But it seems like his father's alive based on the previous chapter.
I don't think he trusts what his brother telling him, which is why he keeps repeating.
Yeah, right. And why, according to Alter, why did his brothers not trust him?
No, I don't think Joseph trusted his brothers.
Oh, yeah. So Joseph didn't trust his brothers. Why not? Sorry.
Tell the truth.
According to Alter, why does he not trust them?
Oh, because at that time they thought he was the Egyptian viceroy.
Right. And what do they want out of him?
Food
Food, right? So they'll say anything
to get the
to get
food.
food, right? And Joseph is the one who says, you must bring your brother down here with you if you ever want to see my face again to get the food and all of that, right? So they'll say, anything, right? And this is, his family who essentially betrayed him, right? Based on their hatred for him. And he's trying to figure out, can I really trust them? Have they really changed? Can they change? And so for Alter, it seems like he's saying, you know what? I revealed myself, Ani Yosef, but I need to know now, like, were they lying to me? Is my father still alive? Yeah, Stan?
But these are commentators also who know the end of the story. If we start at
True.
the beginning, you
True.
don't know the end of the story.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. Richard Friedman.
I have a question.
Yeah, Nancy.
He keeps asking if his father is still alive. Is that because, I mean, it would alter the relationship with his brothers? Why does he keep asking that?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. So we're really going to focus on just those three words, Ha'od Avichai, right? Which all the translators either said, is my father still alive? Is my father still well? Or is father still in good health? So we're trying to figure out, why did he ask that question? Right? If we look at the conversation that took place in chapter 43 or 44, sorry, it seems like his father's still okay based on Judah's retelling of the story. But now he's really saying, like, is he really okay? Is he really alive, or were you just saying that? Right? Alter seems to say that he couldn't trust his brothers because he's wearing the mask of an Egyptian. And then he reveals himself, I'm Joseph. I'm just checking, is my father still alive? Were you lying to me? Is he still okay? Is he healthy? Am I going to see him again? What does this mean for our relationship moving forward? And then his brothers were dumbfounded, right? They were in shock. And then he has to go a little bit further. Come forward, right? Look at my face. I might look like an Egyptian, but I'm Joseph, your brother, the one that you sold into slavery to Egypt. It's really me. Okay?
I have something.
Yeah, Kathleen.
It seems to me two things. The tension still exists when he says our father versus my father. Is the tension between the two families now still being relived? And
Yeah.
also, if he is asking his father, is your father still alive? Maybe that relates to the fear that the brothers could want to take revenge. And typically you don't take revenge on them until after the father is dead. You don't kill your brother until after your father is dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe that he's asking them that to figure out, are you still revengeful towards me? Is he really alive?
Yeah. 100%. Okay. Let's look at Friedman's commentary. Anybody? I can read. Nancy, go for it.
For all he knows, his brothers were lying to him as the Egyptian official, but now he asks them, tell me your brother Joseph, is he really alive?
So Friedman, similar to Alter, seems to suggest that Joseph might believe that they're lying. And that's why he asks this question, because he was an Egyptian official at the time. He had all of this power. And then he reveals himself, it's me, Joseph, your brother. Is he really alive? I want to know. Okay. All right. Now we are going to look at the Kleokar. So he was from Prague in the 16th century. So the Kleokar was a commentary who one of my professors in Israel considers a psychological commentator who tries to get into the minds of our characters in the Torah, but also into the mind of what how we should be feeling during even sacrifices or whatnot. So here he's going to try to get us into the mind of Joseph and his brothers. Okay. Um, so we have our original verse, right? Ani Yosef, Ha'od Avichai, right? I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? Right. We'll look at both of his comments separate. So first one starts with even though.
You want me to continue?
Sure.
Okay, even though the brothers already told him that one was alive, as was understood from all of Judah's words, nonetheless, Joseph thought that perhaps they spoke thus so that he would take pity on the old man and not cause his death. Therefore, he asked once again, is my father still alive?
Okay.
But they did not perceive it thus and thought that too, Joseph, didn't intend to ask if he was alive or not, but rather to remind them of their sin. Therefore, he said, is my father still alive? Meaning that Jacob, was his father, not your father, because they did not take pity on his suffering as if he were not your father. They were therefore startled and unable to utter a word.
So what's
I'm a
Kleokar?
little confused.
We'll unpack it. What do we think Kleokar is trying to share with us about Joseph's behavior in this moment? about his use of the word avi rather than of or avinu.
They thought he was reprimanding them in a sense by reminding them of their sin and that they didn't care enough about their father to
Yeah,
care for his suffering.
exactly. Right. Joseph cares about Jacob, right? Joseph doesn't want to cause his father any, pain. His brothers might, right? His brothers were the ones, Joseph doesn't know this yet, but, you know, uh, he can assume based on the conversation with Judah that he mentioned that Joseph was dead, right? Which devastated Jacob, right? We know that Jacob then went into mourning, was unable to kind of get out of that stage of grief, right? And Joseph doesn't want to cause any more emotional pain on his father, but perhaps his brothers don't care, right? So he's trying to remind them of their sin, right? The pain that they caused their father by using the word avi. It's kind of a trigger for all of the brothers, and for Cleocar, that is why they were stunned, because they were all of a sudden taken back to the moment of one selling Joseph into slavery, two lying to their father, showing him the blood on the coat, right? All of that pain and trauma that they caused Jacob. Joseph's trying to kind of play, psychological games on them. What do we think of both Cleocar and what Joseph may or may not be doing underneath the surface?
I think he's just assuming that they wouldn't have treated their father properly.
Yeah,
He's just making that assumption. Nobody knows that. And everybody seems to forget that Joseph, when he was young, was an extremely arrogant young man.
yeah,
Nobody remembers that. And that was why the brothers got fed up with him and
yeah,
wanted to get rid of him because he was an arrogant little brat.
yeah. He had a big ego, but we got to, remember he was 16, right? For those of you who remember when, either you were 16 or your children were 16, were they perfect angels? Were you perfect angels at 16?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, I think one of the advantages is that we can read all of these interpretations and they left it ambiguous enough that we think about the moral implications of
Yeah,
each possible outcome.
yeah,
And that makes us improve because we're thinking about it, all of those outcomes in
yeah,
terms of our own moral thinking.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I love reading all of these, commentators. And when you go back into the original Hebrew, I mean, all of this is triggered from three words that if we're just reading a translation, right? I'm Joseph, is my father still alive? We might just zoom past it and continue on with the narrative, right? All of these commentators say, no, slow down. Those three words can change everything, change the what's happening in this scene. Stan?
Well, it's why I've said before that it's not uh, whether the story ever happened, it's why it was written in that way so that we can talk about it in the way that we did, and that's why it was written. I have one other question for you, just detail. You're in the office there now, right?
Yeah.
Are there last week's Jewish journals there? Did you
I
get a paper
I can
copy of that?
check. I can check. I don't know if there
There
are.
wasn't one last week.
There wasn't because of New
There was
Year's.
never a paper copy came around.
No,
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I wanted to know because I couldn't get one. I thought maybe you could. Okay.
I tried to.
Okay. Let's keep going. Right. All right. Rashi's comment. And sorry for like the weird giant, like the different fonts and all of that. Okay, so Rashi's just gonna focus on why were they silent? Why were they dumbfounded? Okay. for so it's his translation or the translation of, for they were amazed at his presence. Why? For Rashi, mipnei habusha. What is Rashi telling us about his brothers?
But they're now ashamed.
They're ashamed. So for Rashi, he's saying they knew as soon as he said Ani Yosef, right? Ha'od Avichai, they knew that's the Joseph, right? That's our brother. But they were silent out of shame.
I think they were silent because they were scared.
They were so that there's
Would make more
possibility.
sense that in his position and what they did to him, they would be scared that he could actually do damage or tell them no
He
food.
already, right, with Shimon, he kept Shimon as like a prisoner, right, when they went back last week, right? So one, they could be terrified. Oh my gosh, if this is Joseph, and think about what we did to him, and now he has all of this power. What can he do to us? But for Rashi doesn't say that they're scared. He says that they were, ashamed for their mistakes of the past. Right? He could be picking up on the word that we had, chet earlier on that Judah mentioned, that Judah understands that there's some sort of sin that he needs to deal with. All right, so his brothers could have been ashamed of that. Okay.
Well,
Yeah, George.
I don't have the dictionary up, but Bahala, that's like total confusion. Everything's
Yeah,
disheveled. It's not a
exactly.
maid. I would have a different take on it.
All right, what's your take?
They were like in shock, like
Yeah, yeah. But
yeah,
why? So why were they in shock? So could for Rashi, what we could let's say we
yeah.
translate that as they were in shock from his face, right? They were just like
Hey,
stunned.
I thought this guy was dead. He's running the country. We're
Yeah,
in big trouble.
yeah,
All the above,
And all the predictions came true. I wondered if they thought back to the dreams that he had taunted
yeah,
them with,
yeah,
and all these predictions are now coming true.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So maybe it's all of it.
yeah. So why do we think Rashi says mipnei habusha out of shame? And feel free to argue with Rashi. That's what all of the commentators would do. All right,
Yeah.
we can say that Rashi is incorrect.
Well,
Well, I think since this is the first evidence really of forgiveness, they're talking about the precursors to shame. If Judah is really the first sort of penitent person to kind of change,
Yeah.
then if you're interpreting it from that level, then you're going to think of it as shame and not just fear.
Hmm.
But I'm sure fear was there too. There
Yeah.
was shame and fear and a recognition
Yeah.
of the power of his prophecies.
Yeah.
But they're talking really about precursors to Shiva because they ultimately admit
Exactly. Yeah.
to hurting him.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at Rashi's second comment. Geshuna Elai, right? Please come and approach. Okay. So Rashi kind of adds, he takes a midrash. Okay. And this is going to be an interesting take. Okay. So I want to read for us where it says he saw. I can read. All right, so he saw that they recoiled, and he said to himself, now my brothers feel ashamed. He therefore called to them and showed them that he was circumcised. So this is a midrash that Rashi possibly agrees with, and that's why he brings it into his own commentary. So we're now getting into the mind of Joseph again, right? He sees that they're stunned, and he thinks to himself, now they feel ashamed, which may have made Joseph feel sad, perhaps. Right? So then he's like, I don't want you to feel bad, maybe. So he calls them forward, and then he shows them that he was circumcised. which does what?
Nothing. It shows him that he's Jewish, but I think a lot of other cultures were also circumcising at that time.
I don't know. I don't think the Egyptians were
Okay.
at that time. It was a pretty newish thing, at least for ancient cultures at that time. And so he's trying to show, look, I'm one of you. And they all had the same moil, perhaps. I don't know. So, okay, so that's Rashi's take, right? That he brought them close so he could show them the sign of the covenant, essentially. And this midrash, this takes place, right, when he says, before he really even says, I'm Joseph, your brother, right? He goes, come and look, at me. And then he reveals, I'm Joseph, your brother, the one that you sold into slavery, all of that. Okay, now we're going to look at Sforno. Okay, so he is now going to talk about the same verse, right? Approach me. And then the idea of, him saying that the one that you sold into slavery. Okay. So why? So this is going to be different than Rashi. He's not going to take the midrashic take. So he'll say, I can just read for the sake of time. He says, why does Joseph invite them closer? He says, so that not all the people hearing me cry can see that it is I who's crying. Right? Now this is going to kind of get into the Joseph is right behind Pharaoh, right? He is second person in charge of Egypt, essentially. Okay. And everyone already heard him crying, and they're probably looking out their windows, taking their binoculars, trying to see what's going on. Okay. And Joseph's thinking, hey, I'm still dressed like an Egyptian. Everyone here knows me as an Egyptian. They can't see me crying, because what is crying? Perhaps in ancient cultures and even today, especially for men, it's a sign of
Weakness.
the sign of weakness. Joseph can't appear weak in front of anybody, right? Last week, he hides his tears. He runs away. This week, he realizes, he looks down, oh my gosh, I'm still dressed as an Egyptian. Like, I'm Joseph, and I'm realizing this now, but I still have another role to play, at least for the time being. So he invites them closer. So they're hearing the crying, and they could just assume, oh, you know what? Joseph just gave those guys some bad news, right? And they're crying. So that's for Sforno, why, for his idea of why Joseph invites them. Very different take than Rashi, right? Could be a selfish take, right? Because we talked about Joseph still has that ego and that arrogance, right? It's not about showing his brothers anything and showing his brothers brotherly love. It's about hiding the fact that he's crying. Okay. Okay. His next line, Asher Mechartem, the one that you sold, by mentioning this episode, you will realize, he's talking to his brothers, that I can be none other than your brother Joseph. And someone mentioned this earlier, right? Because who else knows about this? Was it Anita or Eileen or somebody talked about your identity, right? You have to say, what street you grew up on, all of that to make sure it's really you and it's not a hacker trying to pretend to be you. So only Joseph would have known about this episode. No one else knew that he was sold into slavery. Okay. The people who bought me as a slave had no idea that I was the seller's brother. They had no idea who he was, all of that. So Joseph is saying, it's really me in this moment. There can be no other person named Joseph. Okay. Also, I'm sure Joseph wasn't a very common name in Egypt at that time.
Do they say what name he went under, or did he
in Egypt? Yeah, they talk. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's
Sophanat, I can't pronounce it. Sophanat, Taniat or something.
something like that. Yeah, it's right when Pharaoh gives him a wife and he has kids and he says, you're not going to be known as this. And then he kind of creates a new identity, right? It's like in, um, Breaking Bad when they get new identities at the end of the show and Saul Goodman becomes, somebody else again, and all of that. Joseph becomes somebody different. Um, okay, last little comment. We only have a few minutes. Sorry. Okay, this is Shadal. So he says, now we're back on Ha'od Avichai. So he says, the closing remarks of Judah's plea filled Joseph with real concern about the health of his father, right? Because Judah kept talking about, oh my gosh, if we don't bring, if you bring Benjamin, it's gonna kill me, right? I'm gonna just go straight to my grave, right? You're killing your father by doing this. My heart can't handle it, my mind can't handle it. And Joseph's starting to feel like he's getting that anxiety in his heart. He's like, oh my gosh, like, did I cause more anguish in my father? Like, is he going to die? Am I going to see him again? Like, what's happening with his health? Should I be concerned about this? All of that. So Joseph's starting to like probably breathe really heavily, right? This is really right, during like his episode of when he's crying. All of this is happening. So Joseph is really concerned about the health, right? What's interesting, okay, this is a commentary a few hundred years ago or so, a couple hundred years ago. This could be why the new JPS and others talk about, is my father still well? Is he still in good health? Because they're familiar with all of these commentaries, right? And they're figuring out, Joseph knows he's alive. That much is obvious. But what's going on in Joseph's head is, but is he still okay? Is he still healthy? At least enough for me to see him before he passes. Okay? So the Shadal, although he knew that technically speaking, his father had been alive when the brothers left him, he wanted reassurance about the health of his father. Right? Ha'od Avichai, he wants to make sure, is my father not only alive, but is he okay? Does he still have his health? Does he still have some years left in him? Okay. So now, last little comment, and then I recommend there's a lot of other stuff I think I included in here. So maybe over Shabbos, you all can kind of print this out and do some studying together or on your own and kind of keep coming up with unique takes. So the last one, and this is going to be what a lot of you had suggested, right? Geshu na Eli, why does he say that did he invite them forward? Joseph saw that the brothers were so overwhelmed that they retreated out of fear. Okay, so he's not out of shame or anything like Rashi says, but out of fear. Okay. He therefore called to them softly in an intimate manner so as to reassure them. Alternately, he lowered his voice so that anyone within earshot could not hear him say the words, whom you have sold into slavery. So this is, he takes this from the Baal HaTurim. So why did he not want anyone to hear that he was sold into slavery?
Well, because he's a big shot in Egypt.
He's a big shot in Egypt, right? If the moment the rumor gets out, that guy is actually a slave. He has no right. He's not a real Egyptian. He can't do anything, right? He's not worth anything, right? So he wanted them, he got them closer and whispered, I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery here in Egypt, right? No one and everyone else, again, I mentioned, right, they heard him crying. They're all peeking out those windows, trying to figure out who's crying, what's going on, okay? And then this is the Shadal who's now quoting his father. My father of blessed memory said that Joseph did not want his brother Benjamin to hear a word about his brothers having sold Joseph. This is why he asked all the brothers to come closer except for Benjamin. At that time, Benjamin was still standing somewhat apart from his brothers, as he, of course, was in the dock, having been found in possession of the missing goblet, right? He put the goblet in Joseph's bag last week, right? So he's still away, but he invited the rest of his brothers, Leah's children, closer. He doesn't want Benjamin, perhaps, to hear of the sin of his brothers, right? Benjamin probably didn't know about any of it, right? He wasn't involved originally. All he probably knew was, I had a brother, but he died, right? That's all he knows. So Joseph did not want to maybe cause Benjamin to think less of his other brothers, which is all he has, right? His mother died in childbirth, right? Okay. We're gonna end there because it's after 1 o'clock. I don't want to keep you past that. So let me